Climate change and Rift Valley fever disease outbreak, implications for the food and environment of pastoralists. Rift Valley fever is a zoonotic disease that is caused by an RNA virus transmitted by mosquitoes. The disease affects livestock like cattle, sheep, goat, and camel, and it manifests itself as extensive abortions that happen simultaneously irrespective of the stage of the pregnancy. It causes morbidity and mortality in young animals. Mortality can be up to 30% in sheep, 10 to 15% in cattle, and 5 to 10% in goats. Humans are also infected through contact with infected animal tissue, or consumption of contaminated meat and milk, or via bite of an infected mosquito. The occurrence of Rift Valley fever disease has been more frequent in the recent past, and this is attributed to changes in climate, rainfall patterns that have contributed to this. We do know that pastoralists rely on livestock for animal source foods and also for livelihood. And the management and control measures that are put in place, including trade embargoes during the outbreak, ban of sale of animal source foods, and ban of consumption of animal source foods, and also closure of markets do affect the food system and specifically the food environment, and especially the animal source food that is a key source of nutrition to the pastoralists. We do not know how these measures, the control and management measures of Rift Valley fever, how they affect the food environment, and therefore we put up this study to understand the effect of Rift Valley fever outbreak on the food environment. We identified pathways through which the food environment is affected. The direct pathway whereby the diseased livestock reduce productivity, or they die totally, and therefore reduce availability of animal source foods to the household. But also the control and management measures that are put in place do affect the movement of foods across the markets, because over 90% of the pastoralists rely on the markets for their source of food, and therefore these measures do affect the access to markets. It affects the affordability of it affects income, which eventually affects affordability of food, and of course it minimizes the choices or the options that the pastoralists have for their nutrition. And therefore we conducted a cross-sectional survey in the northern part of Kenya where the pastoralists live. We targeted, sampled about over 767 women and children. We conducted 24-hour recall to assess the nutrition, the dietary intake, and also conducted focus group discussions to understand the depth or the effects of the Rift Valley fever on the consumption patterns and on the availability on the different domains of the food environment. We did perform key informant interviews to understand from different perspectives. And the results show that over 55% of the household were affected by Rift Valley fever in the recent occurrence of 2018 and 2020, whereby about 52% of the goats died, 40% of the sheep died, and 19% of the cattle. 71% of the households reduced their income by 41%. 55% of the households interviewed consumed insufficient energy and protein, as well as vitamin A, and there was a 5.5 reduction in flesh meat consumption. These results show that the measures that were put in place did affect the different domains of the food environment, leading to the changes or reduction in consumption, reduction in the choices of the foods that were available. And therefore we interpret that we recommend that it is important to consider nutrition during the Rift Valley fever interventions. For example, when vaccinations are being given and other measures that are targeted to livestock, it is important that the human component or the response is nutrition sensitive to also take care of their nutrition. For example, include options for to replace or to complement the animal source foods whose consumption has been banned and the production, as well as policies or ways that can support pastoralists to afford food and also to access it in terms of proximity. And therefore, this study shows the link between the livestock, between the human nutrition in terms of consumption, as well as the entire food system, and the linkage or the relationship with the climate change, which is now causing more occurrence of the Rift Valley fever than before. And we hope that this, as a preliminary result, will influence or inform future studies so that the responses in Rift Valley fever are nutrition sensitive. Thank you for listening.